Now, earlier this week on Morning Focus, we spoke with the Ennis resident Ann Marie Broomhead about the ongoing damp and mould issues affecting her home in Clancy Park. A situation, as she says, has been impacting her family's health and well-being for the past 2 years. And today we're turning our focus to solutions. Joining us in studio is Leonard Shanahan of Shanahan Paints. Leonard recently shared practical advice on tackling mould in the home in a social media video that's been viewed 154,000 times, which is pretty incredible. Leonard, good morning to you.
Good morning, Alan. Thanks for having me in.
I suppose, first off, that's an incredible amount of views, which I guess is perhaps points to a bigger issue with damp and mould than maybe we would like to think about out there. What compelled you to make that video?
Well, I think it's just this time of the year, kind of mould tends to become more highlighted in houses because of, the weather outside, colder, the heat kind of ramps up inside, and it just kind of tends to be kind of a breeding ground for mould. But to get 154 views or 154,000 views, normally we do a post, you might get 1,100 views or something if it hits the right market. But yeah, just something obviously definitely relevant to the market at the moment when people are just kind of concerned and they see little spots of mould in the house. That's why they kind of took to it, I suppose. From the number of views, Leonard, I'd suggest you might want to stock up on items and products to tackle damp and mould. You're going to have a lot of customers. It's been a mould killer, yeah. Kind of sales have upped a bit, all right, in it, yes.
So I mentioned we were chatting with Ann Marie Broomhead earlier on in the week, dealing with mould and damp for the past 2 years, which is quite a long time. I'm sure you've heard stories from people like that where they have a big issue with damp and mould in their home and it's going on for a number of years. What goes through your mind when you hear a story like Ann Marie's?
Yeah, so like the concern, like if they're living in something like that, it's just, kind of you don't want to be inhaling the spores of something like that. No, I'm not a medical practitioner, but, it's definitely not healthy, to have it in the home. And the way I looked at it is the small little bit I was treating in the video, that if you don't actually start to treat it, it's going to get worse. And if the environment in the room doesn't change, it's going to get worse.
Okay. Look, we'll get to the root causes of damp and mould, the health concerns and advice and solutions and so on. But how commonplace are situations like Ann Marie's across Clare? I mean, from either homes you've gone to or people coming into Shanahan Paints, is it a pretty serious issue, or is that overstating it somewhat? Well,
from our point of view, it's probably we're treating small areas. So obviously people come in and they tell us they want to treat mould. They might tell us like to have it all over the ceiling or to have it all over the walls, or then somebody come in and say they have small pieces of it. But like bathrooms would be a kind of a key thing where there's a lot of steam and moisture. Again, it's cold areas that just the temperature ramps up when they turn on the shower and stuff like that. But also like when it can be as simple as somebody sitting in a room or lying in a room at the night, and the hot air when they're breathing at night hits a cold wall, and then that kind of starts it off. But
so something as simple as that, Leonard.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of hot breath coming out in a cold room.
Yeah, in a cold room. So like if you have, and it normally happens on an exterior wall. It's obviously the inside, but if that wall is cold and hot air starts to hit it, it kind of tends to kind of turn to a bit of condensation, and that's the breeding ground. People may be drying clothes on radiators. That would be something that's definitely a breeding ground for it. And unless something like that changes in these rooms or areas that are in it, it's just going to get worse and worse.
Okay, so maybe take us through that in a bit more detail, the root cause of this. So drying clothes.
Drying clothes on a radiator.
Drying clothes on a radiator, if you're drying them in front of the fire, for example?
Yeah, well, you have a bit more ventilation in that area, in that room, like it's a bigger room. So it just doesn't tend to kind of start to build up in those areas.
I said that like, it isn't me who's drying my clothes in front of the fire, when actually it is.
I do it in that time myself as well. If I have the gas fire on, it just could be, instead of turning on the dryer, you don't want to be wasting electricity. Just clothes horse and a few clothes in front of it. But you would have somebody who's living in a room, maybe renting a room or something like that, and they're very confined to a space, so then they start putting clothes on the radiator or different things like that. Or maybe somebody playing a PlayStation inside the room and it's burning away for 4 hours. The heat off that hits a cold wall. That can tend to start the mould to grow
I have to say, it's amazing, that kind of thing, Leonard. Like, I mean, I would have thought, in a bathroom, if you're having a shower, obviously all of that steam, and if you're not ventilating it properly, that would be an issue. Cold walls, drying clothes and radiators. But something like breathing, and games consoles can get hot, but I wouldn't have thought sufficiently enough to cause that kind of situation.
Yeah, but the walls are so cold, so maybe like if there was a radiator on that wall, it wouldn't be as cold. And then there'd be heat generating through that wall, and then that's obviously some form of prevention from it. But also, again, if you have a wardrobe, freestanding wardrobe, and it's in against the wall, it has no air circulation behind it, again, that's just heat getting in there, not getting air circulation, and it can start to grow there as well. So there's just a few different things that people, if they watch out for, that they may be able to kind of deter the mold from growing there. Again, obviously there's structural problems as well there. If rooms are constantly kind of creating this area, that's something structurally. But from our point of view in the store, customers come in, we're treating areas that, inside in a shower area where there's no explayer or extractor for the steam to go. That kind of builds up that kind of high condensation room inside in those areas, and then that's what starts the mould to grow.
Just to mention as well, if you have any questions for Leonard on how to tackle damp and mould, or it's a question specific to the situation in your own home, do get in touch, because it sounds like from the number of views of Leonard's video, there's a lot of you out there with issues. It is fascinating, Leonard, that it seems like kind of anything you're doing in your house, the breathing, the playing the games consoles, the having a wardrobe up against a wall, there's a lot of different situations that could potentially lead to damp or mould.
Yeah, and what I mean by breathing, at night, if you're sleeping in the room and it's a small enough area, that like just hot air hitting a cold wall can just kind of start it. Like, it's kind of when
we have to breathe though.
Yeah, I understand. But you can treat the mould then as well. So.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, how do you determine then whether the problem is condensation, poor ventilation, or something more structural? How do you get to the bottom of what is causing your damp or your mould? So, normally, if you have damp, that's probably some form of a structural, because it comes in a brown stain. How you'd recognise mould is where you see black spots, and then they just get more aggressively black, because it's just not been treated. So that's kind of more your mould, and then that can be treated by spraying, because mould comes on the surface. So you could put 10 coats of stain block on it, it won't block it, because it'll come back on the surface, where maybe a damp stain will come out through the surface, and that's why you'd use damp stain blocks or something like that to help treat it, to help it keep it back. But sometimes it could be a structural problem where it could be a leak or something like that under a gutter or something like that, and that creates a stain. Or rising damp, that's again a structural thing. There's nothing there to stop the damp from rising, so it becomes more a brown stain, and you can see it kind of spreading. But the black mildew, you'll see that just gets more aggressively black. We touched on Ann Marie's story earlier on, and she was worried about the health concerns of her and her family. I know you're not a doctor, but you deal with this issue enough. Like, how serious can mould be for people with respiratory conditions, for example? Yeah,
so just to point out one thing, for the purpose of the video, I wasn't wearing a mask when I was treating it. I was in a well-ventilated room, and for the purpose of the video, nobody would have been able to know what I was saying if I had the mask on while I was doing it. So but if you are treating any of these areas with mould killers and stuff like that, definitely you should be wearing a mask, to kind of avoid inhaling the spores. One important thing is when you actually go to treat it, that you don't dry wipe it. So a lot of people will go into the room and they would just get a cloth and they'd wipe it, and you haven't actively killed it before you do that. And it's a living organism, so it can travel through the air, through the atmosphere. It can stick to curtains, stick to blinds, it could actually stick to another wall. And people will come in and say, I have a wall internally and it's not an external wall, and I have it there. Well, that could be the reason, where it has actually travelled and took settlement on that wall and started to grow there. So the key thing would be, and the way I think of it, is that when you're treating weeds, you'd never cut the weeds and then spread your environmentally friendly weed killer. What you would do is you would spray it actively when it's actively growing. So you spray it on the mould, and then you leave it for 10-15 minutes, and then you neutralise it by washing it down with warm water and just trying to remove every trace of mould. But the thing is to actively kill it before anybody goes wiping it or cleaning it.
Okay, so if people are getting rid of mould and they say have a mould remover spray, leave that up there for 15 minutes, because I have to confess, when I've done that I might give it like 5 minutes, but that's not long enough.
That's not long enough, no. And also, if you have one in the garage, just make sure it's in date. A lot of people pull these out, might be sitting there for 2 or 3 years, could be gone out of date.
And that's probably exacerbating the problem, is it? Or just not dealing with it sufficiently?
It's not actively going to kill it, because the pigments would have kind of basically faded down and not be at their full strength. So yeah, spray it on it, leave it for 10-15 minutes. There'll be instructions on any of these mold killer bottles. Some will tell you leave it for half hour. Particular one we have tells you leave it for 10-15 minutes. Now sometimes when you go back to it, it may be totally gone. If you have a small bit of it, it could be gone, but you still actively neutralise it by water, warm water and a sponge, and give it a good cleaning to just kind of finally get rid of any of the contamination that's there.
Okay, I suppose the concern for some people, if they're using a mould remover spray and it's, up in like the corner of a room or up on the ceiling, when you spray it, it's all running down the side of the wall.
It is, yeah.
10-15 minutes at a time, it'll be down on the floor.
Yeah. So just when you're actively getting the area of it, have a cloth there and just wipe it before it starts to run down the wall. But make sure you have your mask on and that like. So
okay, lots of questions coming in here. Someone, it is 086 1800 964 if you have any questions for Leonard. One here from someone asking, do I literally have to clean everything in my house? What do I do with paint on walls? When I wipe it off, the paint comes off.
Well, then that would be down to maybe because in the video I've used it and it has ran down the wall and I've wiped it and it hasn't removed the paint. That could be down to just the quality of paint that could be on the wall. There is mould paints you can get, which are anti-mould, and they have a film on them, so that makes them very washable, makes them nearly even scrubbable, and they also have a film on it which deters the mould from growing back. Now they'll never solve it unless again the environment changes in the room, that there's steps taken to change the area where this has started to grow. But the anti-mould paints are very washable. They're anti-mould, they deter the mould from growing back, and they're durable, wipeable and scrubbable. So that's probably the solution there. They also, if that lady has a surface that's, kind of flake and chalking, once it's cleaned and treated, these anti-mould paints, some of them are self-priming, so they will solve that as well. And then she'll have a surface that she'll be able to wipe or treat again if any signs of it start to come back.
Okay, you were talking there about how to tackle the damp and mould. Are there other common mistakes people make, Leonard, aside from not leaving whatever product they're using up there long enough on the damp or mould or whatever it might be, maybe not wearing a mask? Are there other common mistakes you've come across that people make when trying to remove mould themselves that really they should not be doing?
Not really. Just the biggest one is the dry wiping. Everybody just goes up to wipe it away, and they might use Quicks or Sif or one of those products, and you're not actively killing it. You're actually spreading it then. That's the real concern that, people should take into consideration when they're treating it, is just actively spray it with a mold killer first before they do anything, instead of wiping it first and then go and treating it. That's kind of the most common mistake.
Okay, so antibacterial wipes alone, for example, wouldn't be enough to...
Wouldn't be enough, no, because it's embedded in paint, and it's going back to that lady's point there, where when she wiped it, it removed the paint. So if you have a cheaper grade of paint on the wall, and I'm not saying that lady has, I don't know how aggressive the mould is, but some causes of it, they're kind of, cheaper paint might be a chalky type surface on it, and then that just mould embeds in that. We're going back to an anti-mould paint, it has a film on it, and it makes it more of a finish where it makes it more wipeable. So that's kind of something that may help or what may encourage the mould to grow a bit more and stick.
Okay, and you mentioned leaving it for a sufficient amount of time, wiping it with a warm, wet sponge.
Yeah. You're just kind of just removing any form of contamination after it has actively killed it. And
how do you then... and by the way, that listener says, thanks for the advice, Leonard, I'll try that. Okay. So there you go. Once the mould, you've cleaned the mould, how do you stop it from coming back then? Or what in doing that, is that sufficient enough to ensure that it won't come back?
So, to help it, it's all kind of parts. There's a process to kind of just to deter it from growing. Again, as I say, if I do all this and I don't change the environment of the room, I don't maybe get inside in the bathroom, I don't get an explayer. Or it could be simple as there is an explayer there in the bathroom and it's just a bit clogged.
So make sure your extractor fan is cleaned, or just make sure you have an extractor fan in the first place.
Yes, yeah. Now, it is a bit of a job to get one put in, but if you want to cure the problem, these are things that maybe you have to kind of look at and identify what is causing it. But yeah, definitely treating it with your mold killer, going through the process of actively killing it first, and then the biggest help would be an anti-mold paint. That is the biggest. They are created, and the background around them is very like a healthcare setting where you have antibacterial paints inside in hospitals and stuff like that. There is a finish on them which deter the bacteria, like from E. coli gathering inside in those. It's very much the same as anti-mold. They have an inhibitor in it which helps to kind of fight off the mold. Okay, well, since we're talking about products, I might ask you about a few of those. So you've mentioned anti-mold paint. Someone asking, do I need a special paint? My walls by the window are destroyed from wet wiping. Is there a particular type of anti-mold paint that is particularly effective? So, the brands we would do is Zinsser Perma White would be one good quality, and Zinsser would be well known for problem-solving paints, problem-solving primers, finishes. And can you paint that over the paint that's already there, or are you just going to have the mould growing underneath it, or do you need to just completely get rid of the original paint on your walls and start from scratch? No. The key thing would be treating it with the mould killer, and you've actively killed it. That's the key thing. Once you have that done, then you can apply this anti-mold paint. It'll do on walls and ceilings. Comes in white. It can be tintable to colours as well. Now, you're kind of limited on colours, but that do have a good range of colours in it. So once it's all treated, you treat this anti-mold paint very like a regular emulsion or a regular kind of wall paint. It's water-based, washes up with water, quick drying, so you treat it like a regular paint. But it's all down to the finish that it has, which helps to deter the mould from growing back. Someone else asking Leonard about particular types of spray that are effective. Is there any type that you think would do the job? So this is the mould killer. Yeah. So the brand we do is Melrod. It's a German company that make it, distributed by a company in Ireland to us. But we've tested a few, and we're testing a few more to see if they do the job. This particular one that we have, Melrod, I find that any areas that I've tried and tested it is, after I've come back after 10 or 15 minutes, it has eliminated the mould. But I haven't come across one where I haven't, but then I haven't really treated really drastically bad areas with it. I have treated decent sized areas with it, and I've kind of basically tried to prevent from getting worse. So I've got it when it's actually kind of in small areas. So the one we do is Melrod. Moldex is another one that we've heard, and we're trying out another one called HG. So okay, I can just picture people furiously scribbling down these names because we're getting quite a lot of questions. Someone else, it's not a question, but they're making perhaps their own suggestion or advice. They say open a window when using a shower, but which is fair enough to a certain extent, Leonard, but I think you can only leave that open for so long, and it does depend on the conditions outside, doesn't it? Because if it's a cold day like the recent times, and if you leave your window open for maybe longer than 15 minutes, you're letting cold air back into the room, or if it's a windy day, it's blowing the steam back in. Also, you're letting your heat out. You're letting your heat out. So which is probably... But definitely, it's ventilation is definitely a big part of it, but there's, again, as you say, Alan, it's only a certain amount of time you can leave it open, especially having showers. The more you can do to get the steam to be extracted out of that area in the bathroom. Yes, it's like if you wake up in the morning and the bedroom window is slightly condensation, first thing you will do is open the window to let in a bit of air, but you'll only open it slightly, and then ventilation cures that, and then you close the window again. But definitely, also, there is customers come in and say that there's people in their homes and they're in the shower for a half hour, they're in the shower for 40 minutes, and that's just maybe a bit extreme. So definitely you need to have some form of ventilation. You need to have the extractor working there, and you'll have to have windows open.
I mean, and I don't doubt that people spend that long. Who'd spend 40 minutes in the shower? Like, I mean, she should be clean after 5 minutes. There's only so much of you that you can scrub.
And the amount of hair I have,
clogging up the shower. Questions about humidifiers, dehumidifiers. Are they effective? To what extent are they effective? Does it depend on what type you get? Are they worth the investment, Leonard?
Yeah, so the dehumidifiers, you can get them in small ones, and obviously there was one stage there where I had a leak in the house on the floor and that, and the first thing I done is I put a dehumidifier in there to take the moisture out of the air. So definitely, but at this time of the year you could leave a dehumidifier in a room and it'll constantly take water. You'll go to it every day and there'll be some bit of water that's taken out of the air. So it gets to a stage where they work really well, but then they're just kind of constantly maybe taking water out of the atmosphere anyway, or out of the room. Okay. So yeah, there would be an investment but they're not going to solve the problem. They help.
They help, but they're not the be all and end all. We're almost out of time. Any last bits of advice or anything that people need to be aware of when they try to deal with the damp or mould in their homes?
Just be conscious of it. If you do see it another time, if you're inside in a utility room, you may have a dryer going, you may have the washing machine going. Again, that's all kind of heat. It might start to go around the back door of the utility and stuff like that. Just as soon as you start to see it grow, I would be getting it treated before it starts to kind of accelerate.
Okay. Thank you so much for all that advice, Leonard. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be rolling up their sleeves and heading into Shanahan's to get all those products that you mentioned. Yeah,
well, we're there to help. So if they have any questions, bring in a photo or something like that. Maybe we can help diagnose what the problem is.
And actually, that's a really good point. If you are going into Leonard and the gang there, take a picture of the area because it gives them a sense of how much stuff you'll need or what type of stuff will work best. Leonard Shanahan of Shanahan Paints in Ennis, thank you very much for being with us this morning with some great advice and solutions on how to tackle damp and mould.